So when I got into Barry, I wanted to do something totally different. And the fact that Barry's job as a police scientist is vital to his, his morality and what he does and why he does what he does was really interesting to me. And the other thing is approaching a book that's more about speed. And this is really somebody who is dealing with speed and slowing down and speeding up and what that means.
I think there is great potential in a Flash story, a movie centering around the Scarlet Speedster, one that may be a reflection of our own lives, caught up in the hustle and bustle, the message being to consciously choose to slow down, to breathe, to take in the moments that really matter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hi, hey there, how you doing? Now, I hope for your sake you've managed to watch the first part in this two-part series where I break down how to make a good Flash movie. In the first part, we took a look at what makes Barry Allen tick, the importance of R.S. West being his lightning rod, his past both in the comics and editorially, and the potential lying there for a story of hope, of overcoming trauma and consciously choosing to move forward, to run towards the demons in your closet, whilst also learning to slow down. We also mentioned the show and a few issues there. We highlighted Ezra Miller being, problematic to say the least, and a few issues I had with his characterization in the movies. That being said, this time I want to shift the focus to how I would make a Flash movie. In a hypothetical scenario in which I was given the keys to the DC library, what would I do with a Flash movie? How could we create not just a good, but a great Flash movie? Well, that's what we'll be discussing today.
You're Bart Thawne? You don't belong here.
No matter how fast you run, you can't save everyone.
I've been waiting half my life for you to wake up and love me.
Happy birthday, Mom. I'm so sorry. I should have been there.
I ran a long way from the future to hurt you, Barry.
Now, there's a lot of ways we can attack this, avenues we could go down. I think what a lot of you guys want out of this video is for me to pitch a trilogy, and whilst my ideal trilogy might be Rogues, then Grodd, then Thawne, I think what is more realistic is that we're just going to get one Flash movie before he joins the Justice League. Now, I want to tell you why that might be a good thing. As we previously established, Barry Allen's character is one of change, of a character that has two major conflicts to overcome, the trauma of his dead mother and his inability to slow down. Now that second one is quite dense. Barry has an innate heroic quality due to the comics he read as a kid, a need to help people, compelled to do the right thing.
Stop! You're supposed to stop for people who need help!
When he's given super speed, this heroic drive in him is heightened, feeling he has to do everything, save everyone. Whilst it's a noble quality, it means he sacrifices a life with Iris, to slow down and enjoy key moments, that he's always moving on to the next task.
Where you going?
Train station.
For what? It's a robbery in progress, not a crime scene.
Mirror Master's there. It'll be a crime scene soon enough.
It's also what allows villains to get the edge on Allen, using his Russian nature against him, something we see bite him in the ass quite a bit. If a movie can create a hero's journey centering around Allen dealing with his trauma and coming to terms with the fact that he needs to slow down, we might just have an amazing movie on our hands. But a little problem too. With Barry learning to slow down to defeat his villains and to have a life, where does that leave us? Where can the character go next? We start to have the same problem the comics has had, the same problem shows like Young Justice has had, a Barry Allen that's just a guy, a fully formed hero. The drama of resolving these conflicts would make for one really solid movie, but it wouldn't give us anywhere to go in the future. And sure, that's kind of emblematic of the comics. In the comics, he's the most well-rounded member of the Justice League, a character that has come to terms with these grievances and doesn't have anywhere left internally to go. Sure, he might be a pleasant character going forward, but we've essentially used up all the good meat in the first movie. As I discussed in my Superman video, in storytelling we have our external stakes. This might be Neo fighting Agent Smith for humanity's survival. The internal stakes, Neo rising above his self-doubt and believing in himself, and the philosophical stakes, what Neo believes in versus what Smith believes in. And usually the winner of the bout usually decides which philosophical outlook reigns supreme. In The Dark Knight, the external might be the bomb on the two ships, the internal stakes might be Bruce's grievances with the Joker, and the philosophical stakes might be the Joker and Batman's views on the people of Gotham.
What were you trying to prove? That deep down, everyone's as ugly as you.
What I'm saying is if we remove a character's internal conflict, then there's little places for them to go in the future. If they've come to terms with their internal conflict and have made a choice, we know where they stand. What we have here is a dichotomy between wanting to move the character forward and still having something there to develop in the future. This is a problem Leia and Han face in Return of the Jedi. Their internal conflict has been resolved by the end of Empire, and that leaves them with only two options to go in Return. For the sake of the plot, they choose the external stakes. But external stakes can only be so interesting, but without internal or philosophical ones, it can make the action of a movie quite passive. All I'm saying is if we tell a good Flash movie, a genuinely good movie that hits the core of what makes Barry Allen tick, and we resolve those internal stakes, where can his character go in the future? Beyond the plot or the villain, where does Barry go internally beyond these ideas? This is why I'm pitching just one good Flash movie today, as I think one good movie is all Barry Allen really needs before he joins the Justice League. Now, I'm not saying Barry couldn't potentially have a trilogy. As I mentioned before, I had a rough idea of the villains I'd use. All I'm saying is if we got one shot at Barry before he joins the Justice League, I think we could create a really solid movie that resolves his internal conflict, allowing him to come out the other side a well-rounded person. The Barry that comic readers know. That well-balanced hero. Historically, Barry has best worked off the Justice League in terms of what his character offers. As I said in my previous video, Barry is the most well-rounded member of the Justice League, and he should offer that balance. A sense that he comes to terms with the demons others have not. With such large personalities, it is Barry, just a well-rounded guy that brings these gods under the fold. Now, that's a bit ironic, isn't it, that the most normal personality in the Justice League has the powers of a literal god. He could arguably the most OP hero if such a filmmaker decided. Well, it's funny I've said that, as I want to lean into that. For too long now, I believe we've been playing it safe with the Speed Force, especially on the TV show. I want this movie to highlight the infinite potential of what such a power holds. I want to see Barry expand his mind and open up to new parts to the Speed Force, allowing for more inventive uses of his powers, unlocking a depth we previously just haven't seen. I want that depth to be kept at lock and key by his trauma, and only after coming to terms with his past and letting go can he reach these new depths to his powers. I think what's important is that I first lay out what I want the story to focus on before we then get into that. Generally, I want to focus on two major themes: the importance of choices. The harder the choice, the more difficult the conflict, essentially forcing Barry into making choices that reveal character. Another aspect I want to explore is a relation to speed, that it doesn't matter how fast you can run, how fast you can escape your problems, because there are always something or someone that will always catch up to you. Now, these two ideas will inform themes like choices, change, control, healing, that will be explored in the movie. Elements that will all tie together in a nice bow. Whilst laying out themes is important, I think it's also important to elaborate on the visual and musical language of the movie. Whilst I think it can get away with being shot like any other superhero movie, I think the use of colour could be really interesting here. As for the music, last time we pulled from Giacchino's score of Star Trek to inspire the music for the Green Lantern movies. This time I think we can pull from another one of his scores to not just inspire the music of the film, but the structure of the storytelling too. Pulling from one of the most kinetic, visceral action movies ever made. I will die on the opinion that Speed Racer is a fantastic movie. A lot of people will complain that it's over the top, cartoonish, or crammed with CGI. CGI that kind of looks like Spy Kids, honestly. And generally, a decent question to rebut all that is, how would a story this bombastic and over the top be served better by being traditionally shot or more realistic? This is a formalist movie, one where the visual language follows the character's heightened feelings. The character's literally called Speed Racer. It makes you fall in love with racing through the character's love of it. By the end of the movie, it evolves into a surrealist celebration of all of the moments that have led up to this moment. Like The Incredibles being the greatest Fantastic Four movie we've gotten, I think Speed Racer is the greatest Flash movie we've gotten. And you're probably thinking, what? Yeah, I said that. Speed Racer is a great Flash movie. We have a character that is obsessed with speed, with being fast.
Speed Racer, slow down!
A character that holds himself back due to lingering love and trauma, and over the movie comes to deal with that. That's literally Barry Allen. This acceptance of his past and who he is allows him to unlock new heights to his racing, evolving into a symphony of colour and expression. A movie that is both sincerely bold as it is boldly sincere.
Racing hasn't changed and it never will.
In Speed Racer, Speed's relationship with his brother is what informs a majority of his decisions, and similarly, I think it'd be appropriate to do the same here. Have his mother's death inform Barry's decisions, to work for the police, and so on. But with her dead, we need another character to inform Barry's decisions in the present. And that's where I think Iris comes in, much like Trixie in Speed Racer, someone to converse with and fight for. Iris is Barry's lightning rod, and we need to see that. Have her be the beating heart of Barry that keeps him going when dealing with adversity, when all hope looks lost. I want the movie to emphasize Barry's connection to the Speed Force, to slow down, to listen to the Speed Force the same way Speed listens to his car. I want him to be forced to make choices that reveal character, show us that he's changing and choosing to slow down, to not wear the burden of his heroism on his shoulders, that he doesn't need to control everything, and only through relinquishing control and not diving in headfirst is Barry then able to defeat the bad guy, to stop looking 2 steps ahead and start looking at the bigger picture, what's right in front of him. Now, I think there's an opinion going around that people are generally sick of the origin story. But the problem is not the origin story at all. Look at Moon Knight. The problem is how we then tell that origin story. We need to be more creative as storytellers. What if we decide to pull from the comics, dive deep into the Speed Force lore and have Thawne reveal to Barry that he gave himself his powers, running so fast that he became the lightning bolt that traversed time and struck himself in the past. In other words, we're attaching the finale of the movie to the hero's origin. The villain is essentially defeated by the birth of the hero. All I'm saying is it'd be nice to make the villain, or at least the story of the film, instrumental in our hero's creation, and not just a byproduct of a random accident unrelated to the events of the movie. With that being said, I think it's time that we look at the characters. As with other fan casts, I'll go through the easy ones, and then I'll go into the ones that I feel like I need to explain. For Jay Garrick, it's Dennis Quaid. Joan Garrick, Emma Thompson. For Captain Daryl Fry, it's Ed Harris. Melanie Thawne will be Anna de Armas, and Thaddeus Thawne will be Sean Bean. If you know much about Sean Bean in movies, I guess you can predict where his character will be going. Seriously, can this guy just survive one movie? Just one. As for Iris West, I want to go with Lily James. Iris is meant to be extremely likable. The type of person you just could not be mad at. She's caring and considerate but stands her ground. And I think Lily James in her roles has displayed this quality. I think she could convey being Barry's beating heart, to be his lightning rod. This brings us to Captain Cold. Considering he's a minor villain, a villain that has a code of honor, that won't harm innocents, I'm going with Sam Worthington. There's just something about it, I just feel like he could really do a solid job. As for the villain of the film, Eobard Thawne, well, for those that have been following me for a while now, you already know that I've loved the idea of the boys Anthony Starr to play the Reverse Flash. Something about this is just so perfect. I feel like I don't really need to explain this one, just watch The Boys and you'll know right away why he'd nail this role. Ugh, yikes. As for Barry, I'm just gonna go out and quickly say it, then I'll give you my reasons why. It's Lucas Till. Look, no surprise really there, he's the fancast favourite, but for good reason. Not only is he blonde, everything about his filmography is an audition for Barry Allen, especially how he portrayed Havoc in the X-Men movies. Havoc's role in The First Class was understated. He's surrounded by a bunch of larger personalities with distinct opinions and worldviews, much like Barry in the Justice League. He's shown to stand up for what's right, sometimes diving in too quickly, an attribute Barry is well known for. No! That isn't it either. I think the best example of Till displaying a heroic quality is in the movie Son of the South. Released last year, the movie explores racism and Till's sympathy to the oppressed, standing up for what's right. He displays a heroic nature, standing up for his principles and what he believes is right and wrong, a quality that Barry is well known for. On top of that, in all of his work, he's been able to play a generally likable and charismatic person, which would make for a great lead. This guy is just the perfect Flash, just waiting to be casted. Now, we've talked so much about the type of story we'd make, the type of cast we'd have without actually diving into that story. So let's elaborate on that story. I want to tell an origin story, but not in a chronological way. I want to jump into a narrative, but have revelations and backstory hit us throughout the story. So that means the Flash has been the Flash for a bit. We start with an establishing action scene. We use the opening minutes of the film to establish important things like the Flash's powers and create a well-defined character, personality traits, and values, like rushing in and solving the problem as quickly as possible. Right now, Barry feels that he has to do everything, be everywhere, and this creates a very stern persona. Barry is facing Captain Cold, and during his encounter, he might look into a reflection of a pane of glass and see his mother scream out the last words she said before she died. She screams out, "Barry, run." After screaming this out, Barry runs in to stop Cold, but Cold plays into Barry's desire for heroism, using Barry's Russian mentality against him as a way to escape and then trap him. This scene should show us a cool action scene, but it should also reveal character and show us a character flaw that Barry has to work on and overcome, similar to what the opening action scene did for Speed in Speed Racer. From here you might get your typical Act 1 stuff, establishing key locations and characters, Iris, Jay, Captain Fry, and the relationship Barry has with all of these people. Essentially we're establishing a status quo and the problems Barry then has to overcome. Barry might be late for a date with Iris, but their connection is so strong and the chemistry is just electric. However, if he is to have a life with Iris, he needs to slow down, or as she puts it, be on time. In other words, he needs to make time to have a life, to not be late for a date or even a meeting. This is sort of a similar arc to that of Captain America. Both are heroes with an innate heroic quality, and for both of these characters they have to learn to get a life, to learn that there's more to life than just duty. Obviously Barry will learn this lesson by the end, but only through Thorn, a character obsessed with speed, obsessed with Barry. Coming to the past Terminator style, Thorn seeks to make Alan's life a living hell. In the meantime, Barry will visit his godfather and mentor Jay Garrick for advice, kind of like that night owl scene in Watchmen. This conversation should highlight the central theme of the movie for Barry, to slow down. Jay might tell him to make some time for the things that really matter, spend some time with Iris, that there'll always be heroes to save the world, that you don't need to put the burden of the world on your shoulders, that you're just a guy. Whilst Jay might be saying this, there might be some old photos in the background of the Justice Society or the tin hat as a nice Easter egg. Regardless, Barry is still steadfast in the idea that it's his responsibility, that if he can help someone, anyone, he should. Maybe this might be a good time to insert a flashback with his mum, their car broken down, Barry saying, "Mum, why won't anyone help us?" Nora saying, "Some people are just in a rush." Barry saying, "But we need help. I'd help us if I were driving past." Nora just smiles in appreciation of Barry's altruism, telling Barry to come help her with the wheel. So, within the first half an hour, we've already established Barry's character, powers, his motivation, and his relationships to the people around him. That his altruistic quality has made him a person focused on duty. That he's a somewhat serious person. From here it's about gearing up to the end of Act 1. We see Barry privately investigating the murder of his mother, in his labs with no one around. He's investigating his mother's murder and the murder of 3 other people that night who mysteriously were killed in the same way. Just as Barry is connecting a few dots, he gets a call from Iris, expecting her to answer. Barry nonchalantly answers, say that he's busy, only to hear a man answer the phone. Thorn reveals himself and puts Iris's life in danger. This leads to Barry speeding over, engaging in a fight/chase sequence between Thorn and Barry, something with a visceral sense of force and movement, just like the races from Speed Racer. The fight ending in Barry going so fast that he loses control and comes out in the future. Lost for a second, he's in a state of shock, taking in the future technology, running around the city before stopping at the feet of a giant statue, looking up to see himself 15 feet tall. From here, he's surrounded by future tech authorities, but greeted by President Thaddeus Thorn, telling Barry he's in the 25th century. This is where Barry spends time learning about what he will become, the legacy he'll leave behind, the limits to his powers or lack thereof. We see Barry start to open his mind to the Speed Force, to not just move faster but think faster. We see him density shift for the first time, as he sees holo recordings of his prior self doing such a thing. And as he's developing these abilities, he gets a rundown on Earbod Thorn. Thaddeus tells Barry he's a descendant from the 23rd century, obsessed with Barry Allen, so much so that he recreated the experiment that birthed Barry's powers, much like Barry running so fast that he ended up in the 23rd century as well, looking for a way back. But he went a step further and used the cosmic treadmill Barry will one day create to go back to the 21st century instead. Barry confused, asking why the 21st, to which Thaddeus doesn't have an answer. Thaddeus explains that the cosmic treadmill focuses your powers, that the Speed Force might spit you out in any time, but with the treadmill it can focus to a specific time, to a specific event. However, all this is flipped on its head when the Reverse Flash appears, traversing time without any need for the cosmic treadmill. that his reverse speed force is different to the powers that Barry draws from. Earbord kills Thaddeus, phasing through his chest, to which his daughter Melanie cries out and lies with him. Now these are all bullet points, but if this was a proper script, I'd insert scenes where we develop these two characters a little more so we care about his death, but right now I'm just going to stick to the bare bones of the story. Alright, so Barry manages to barely escape, travelling back to the 21st century using the cosmic treadmill, but with a newfound knowledge of what he can do and a new height to his powers. Now this is just an Easter egg, but Melanie Thorne is Bart's mum, so yeah, if they continue this universe, we're low-key setting up Impulse. Now this roughly would be at the midpoint of the movie. This might be a good time to insert a scene with Barry and Iris. Iris consoling him on what he's seen and the expectations that he's under, saying to not think about the future, to be in the present, to stop moving so fast, to look at what's right in front of him, not what's ahead, to not think about the next thing and the next thing after that, to slow down. From here, Iris might remind him of the time that he first met, how he was able to be present then. At the steps of the courthouse where Barry is leaving after a trial and Iris is trying to gather some tea, Barry, who is usually in a rush, is stopped by the chemistry that the two share. So, with Barry taking on her advice but not entirely putting it into action just yet, this transitions us to the third act. This will test Barry's ability to overcome the trauma of his mother. It will test if he can be present and slow down. It will test our hero to see what he's made of, much like the third act of Speed Racer, seeing the limits of speed and the expression of his internal conflict. This is just a personal touch, but I would love an uneasy sense of tension leading to Earbord's next encounter with Barry. In the final battle, Barry may have learnt new abilities, but he's still not over the death of his mother, still searching for his mother's murderer. However, this weight is shed when Earbord tauntingly tells Barry his desire for vengeance, Barry wanting to know why, and this is when Earbord drops the true bomb on Barry. Earbord says that he was a huge fan of The Flash, went through the arduous task of recreating the experiment. Midway through the fight, Barry bloodied interjects saying he already knows all this, that Earbord was just a fanboy. But Earbord smiles, telling Barry there's more to it than that. Upon getting his powers, he learns the truth of his lineage, that time collapsed in on his mind and he could see events through generations, the future and the past, that Nora Allen had twins, Barry and Malcolm. But doctors at the hospital miscarried the Thorne baby next door, so they took one of the Allen kids and gave it to the Thornes. Upon Nora awakening from her cesarean, they told her that they could only save one of the kids, when in reality one was given to the Thornes. Earbord learning the truth meant he was angered beyond belief, the shitty life Malcolm was born into, the poverty, name, and life Earbord inherited. He felt vindicated, taking vengeance on the people responsible for the life that he was meant to have, but he knew he couldn't kill the people responsible before it had happened, as it would mean that his own existence would be erased. But after? Well, that was free reign, and so Thorne went about his vengeance, killed the doctors, midwife, and nurses responsible along with Barry's mother, and for Barry, everything clicks. Now, much like Neo in The Matrix, or Speed in Speed Racer, there's a moment where the character starts to believe in themselves. It's a moment that is genuinely triumphant. I want a moment like this, but only if it works narratively. In Overcoming Thorne, Barry has used the Speed Force to open up and enhance his mind, to predict where Earbord will strike next. Whilst Barry is moving faster, he has internally slowed down. He's come to terms with his past. He knows his mother's murderer now. He's looking at him in the eyes, and he's learnt to take his time. He's learnt to take in the moment, to not rush in. Whilst Thorne is incredibly fast, Barry's just moving around him with an accelerated alertness of his surroundings. The Reverse Flash, not so much. Earbord, realizing that he's losing this battle, says, "If I can't beat you, I can take what you love." Barry responding, "I can beat you to Iris, there's no point trying." To which Earbord says, "Not if you never met her." Barry, in shock, chases after Reverse Flash as they both run so fast they disappear into the time stream. Whilst Earbord can target exactly where he wants to go without the treadmill, Barry is going to have to just wing it and focus incredibly hard to exit the Speed Force at the exact moment he needs to not overshoot. To be there to save Iris at the steps of the courthouse where they first met. From here we get a montage, a compilation of the events of the film contrasting against Barry moving faster than he ever has before, similar to the climax of Speed Racer. We see Barry as a kid saying he'll help someone if they need it, Jay reminding Barry to slow down once in a while, Nora screaming out, "Barry, run!" Thaddeus saying, "This is what you'll one day become, the fastest man alive," and Iris at the steps of the courthouse giving Barry a smile. With a strengthened sense of focus, Barry catches up to Earbord, phasing directly through him, stealing his speed. With Thorne defeated and without his powers, Barry is now overcharged after absorbing Thorne's speed force, like a light bulb with too much electricity coursing through it. For Barry to survive, he'll have to expel what he's absorbed. So Barry runs so fast that he enters the time stream once more, and we see a symphony of expression much like Speed Racer, a gorgeous pairing of music and colour and light, a sequence of movements going further into Barry's past. It feels like he's moving too fast to stay alive as the time stream starts to go yellow, that Barry is joining the Speed Force itself, that he's becoming pure energy. But it's his lightning rod, it's Iris. The simple thought of her and the strength of their love is what keeps him from being taken by the dimension, lasting just long enough that he can exit at the moment he got his powers. If you don't see what we're doing here, essentially we're making it so that that wasn't a random lightning storm that struck him. It was Barry striking himself, creating the Speed Force in the first place. A time loop that makes the hero's origin instrumental to the story's climax. In other words, just tight storytelling. As the lightning bolt strikes down, we fade out into a flash of light into the present where Iris wakes up to an empty bed, walking out to the kitchen half awake to see Barry already having made a big breakfast, this showing that he's making time for her, making time for the little things, to be present. From here, Barry and Iris may talk about Barry closing the case regarding his mother's murder over breakfast, saying that he needs to move forward. Montaged over this with footage of him packing up a box labelled Nora Allen and turning a light off in an evidence room. This transitions us to Barry at the station, where Captain Fry calls out for Barry Allen. "Barry, where the hell is that kid?" To which Barry says, "Right here, boss." Fry, looking surprised, says, "Wow, you're on time for once." From here, Barry is paired with Detective August and told to investigate a scene. Barry, after a bit of deductive reasoning and seeing enough evidence, can pinpoint where and when the next crime scene will be. Changing into the Flash and confronting Captain Cold mid-heist. Cold goes to push Barry's buttons in the same way he did at the start of the movie, but it isn't working. Pulls the same tricks to freeze him or make him slip on ice, but Barry now has learnt to slow down, to not rush in, to have fun being a hero, to feel like he doesn't have to be everywhere at all times. The movie ending with Barry making a snarky comment to Cold before lunging in for a punch. Boom, freeze frame, there's your movie. So, I think we've made a half-decent outline for a movie here. We've done what we've set out to do. Tell a Flash story about change, about moving forward, one that explores the Speed Force, Barry's fears and weaknesses. We've created a character that comes out the other side having learnt something about himself, having grown and addressed his faults. In that way, I think this would make a pretty decent Flash movie. Ultimately, a Flash story is one about moving forward, to run towards your problems instead of away. Robert McKee, famous for his book on storytelling, wrote, "Storytelling is the most powerful way to put ideas into the world today. Movies, stories are the creative conversion of life itself into a more powerful, clearer, and more meaningful experience. So in that way, stories allow us to create defined journeys for characters that we can put ourselves in. The idea of telling a story about a character running towards a problem, not away from it, a character that has to shift his priorities to have a more meaningful life, is a very relevant and poignant message in today's world. A movie about learning to slow down, to appreciate the gorgeous world we're in, the amazing people we share our lives with, and the potential a life of optimism and altruism leads. I personally just think that's a movie we need right now. But that's just how I would do a Flash movie. I want to hear your thoughts on not just this pitch, but how you would do a trilogy if given the chance. As I said before, my go-to would be The Rogues, then Grodd, then Reverse Flash. If you guys haven't followed me on Twitter yet, be sure to, as I've been a lot more active lately. It's probably the best way to get in touch with me. With that being said, have a lovely day everyone, and I will see you guys in the next video. Ciao.